Would you join me as we light our chalice? The chalice lighting words are in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Back when I attended a Christian church, the Methodist Presbyterian Union in Phelps, and really many years before that, there were certain words spoken in a Christian church that I sure didn't understand. The whole blessing, blessed, bless grouping gave me trouble. I didn't know what they meant. When you got right down to it, I didn't know. So I asked the minister. I thought, boy, this guy ought to be the one to ask. He told me that a blessing is an unexpected, undeserved gift from God, right out of the theological dictionary, and it didn't help. I didn't know what that meant. So this month is going to be a very valuable one for me and maybe for some of you as I find out what blessings really are. Preparing for this, I found a quote that Benjamin Franklin said that really sheds light on this. He received a letter from a friend thanking him for having done the friend a kindness. Good old Ben Franklin said, "As to the kindness you mention, I wish I could have been of more service to you than I have been. But if I had, the only thanks that I should desire are that you would always be ready to serve any other person that may need your assistance. And so let good offices go around, for mankind are all of a family. As for my own part, when I am employed in serving others, I do not look upon myself as conferring favors, but paying debts."
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's nice to be here again. Thank you for having me. I know that some of you know I will be your intern minister over the next couple years, so you'll see me maybe more than you like. But here I am. Was it Kathy or Dorothy or Nancy who said you remembered me as the bacon sermon? I hope I leave something memorable again today. We'll see. All right, and don't worry about this stack of papers. I just make it very big print. It's not all that long. Okay, so the blessings of beauty. It is a fine spring morning. The flowers are lovely. The air feels right. Even the rain does. Those windows, no longer frosted like the last time I was here, they enable you to see some of the beauties of nature outside. And my comrades, it is May Day, International Workers' Day, as well as the traditional day for dancing around the maypole to celebrate the arrival of spring. What a full day. What a blessing. It is a beautiful day, and I'm glad to be with you all. Now, when my son Evan was just a very little boy, only about 2 years old, he experienced his first crush, and he crushed on Michelle Pfeiffer. He was sitting on my lap as I flipped through a Newsweek magazine. When I landed on a review of the movie Frankie and Johnny, he ran his chubby little hand over the picture of Pfeiffer as Frankie. "Pretty," he said, "pretty." I said, "That's Michelle Pfeiffer," and he's continued to stroke the magazine. "Pretty Shell, pretty Shell." Clearly, Evan, as a very little boy, felt strongly the lure of the beautiful. Now I'm going to shift gears for just a minute here, and I'll come back to beauty in a few. I'm sure you know the phrase, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Though for many folks, that saying originated with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we Unitarian Universalists probably know that the first version was actually written by Reverend Theodore Parker. And here are his words. Look at the facts of the world. You see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. From what I see, I'm sure it bends toward justice. Now that is truly a beautiful idea, don't you think? The universe itself is working toward the good, the right, the just. We need only be patient, and all good things will come. The garden will be restored, and justice will roll down like waters. Parker was so optimistic in 1850. Even with the enactment of the Fugitive Slave Law, which he ignored, and John Brown's insurrection, which he supported. American progress, though, was the emergent story, and that story was expressing itself in a number of ways. Manifest destiny, the shining city on the hill, the articulation of equality. But we know that this story was a narrative rather than a history, a myth rather than a chronicle. That is, if histories and chronicles are any more fact-laden than narratives and myths are. Now, I'm not being critical of Reverend Parker here. He was a product of his time. His sense of the continual and progressive triumph of the right, of a moral universe bending toward justice, this reflected the times. This reflected his social position as a white male with status, education, and property. All was going well for him and men like him. And that included white women too, if they didn't mind being legally and economically disenfranchised, which some of them did mind, as we know. But we know that the native peoples whose ways of life were destroyed. We know that the Africans enslaved and transported here to be worked to death for money and then persecuted for their race after emancipation. They are not automatically included in Parker's vision of a moral universe. And those are some ugly facts still being played out in contemporary American culture. My own lived experience does not really support Parker's notion that the arc of the moral universe is bending toward justice, as much as I might wish it did. I see people disenfranchised, people displaced by violence, both physical and economic. I see communities that can't support quality education for our children, or refuse to make the commitment to quality education because some don't see all of the children as ours. I see people unable to afford basic housing and nutritious food. I see people struggling for decent health care, struggling to understand bureaucracy, struggling to find doctors willing to take their insurance, struggling to pay for medication. I see people held in suspicion and in contempt, abused and beaten because of their physical characteristics or self-expression, because of things that have to do with their very being. And I struggle to see all of this, to let all this ugliness and injustice into my sight, into my mind, because it can be just too painful and overwhelming. I get tired. I just want to stop and look at the flowers and smell the fresh air, the rain, just retreat from all the conflict. I came across this little meme on Facebook the other day when I was supposed to be doing my homework. It says, "Dear white people, no one saying your life can't be hard if you're white, but it's not hard because you're white." I'm not sure who said it or under what circumstances, but that sentiment really helped me. It really rang true from where I stand. I face many challenges, financial challenges, family challenges, existential challenges. But the value of my life is not in question as I walk down the street or drive through a neighborhood. For far too many people in our country, that is simply not the case. That is part of our social reality, and to me it speaks contrary to Parker's belief that the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. So I promised I would come back to beauty, and so I'm going to do that now. But as I unfold what I mean by beauty, I think you will find that I have been talking about it all along. In Adventures of Ideas, isn't that a great title? In Adventures of Ideas, published in 1933, the philosopher Alfred White Northhead wrote that the teleology of the universe is directed to the production of beauty. Through the lens of Parker's language, the arc of the universe bends not toward justice, but instead toward beauty. Now, given all the ugly realities I described a few minutes ago, you might ask, how can Whitehead's idea be any more true than Parker's? It depends on what Whitehead means by beauty. And I think you'll find it's a rather curious notion, but it's a very useful one for facing both the ugliness and the splendor of our social lives, of our social reality. For Whitehead, the universe tends toward beauty, and by beauty he means a diversity of forms. Whitehead's universe is an aesthetic universe rather than a moral one. In his thinking, the universe is amoral. It is neither good nor bad in and of itself, but it is aesthetic. That is, it is full of forms. When Whitehead talks about beauty and form, he's not talking about the classical Greek definition of beauty. Or at least that definition is only a subset of what he means by beauty. And we know what that classical definition of beauty is. It's characterized by symmetry. Right? Any object can be bisected by a line, and the two sides are perfect mirror images of each other. Now, back in the late 90s, there was a lot of popular talk about symmetrical and proportionate beauty as the basis for biological efficacy and worth. The survival of the human species, they said, depended upon symmetry and proportion as the definition of the most viable gene pool. Uniformity was touted as both normative and valuable. Now, I recall another Newsweek article, compounded by a People magazine article, I'm not proud of that, but I did read it, about asymmetry and the short marriage between Julia Roberts and Lyle Lovett. Do you remember that? Julia, like Michelle Pfeiffer, was so absolutely and classically beautiful. And Lyle, well, Lyle was just not. Right? When you bisected Julia's face, it was symmetrical, except for that little mole under her right eye that just enhances all of the beauty. And Lyle's face, well, it's all out of proportion. He has a gnarly nose, and one of his eyes is slightly lower than the other one. He was almost Quasimodo, for goodness sake, right? He's a little bit hunched. There were headlines at the time suggesting that the mismatch of beauty might have contributed to the quickness of the divorce. They just weren't properly matched in beauty. Symmetry and proportion are not the idea of beauty that Whitehead means when he says the universe is aimed toward beauty. In fact, only together are Julia and Lyle utterly beautiful. And not because her version of beauty is on one end of the spectrum and his version of ugliness is on the other. Not because of that. They are beautiful together because together they show a diversity of forms. Beauty for Whitehead means a multiplying of diverse forms. And this is something I think we actually understand quite well, even if we didn't necessarily call it beauty. Think about it this way. Would you want to choose to eliminate a tulip in order to save a daffodil? A sunflower over a daisy, even one bizarrely dyed pink. An elm over a walnut tree. Would you want to choose Herman Melville over Rumi, Annie Lamott over Louise Erdrich, Eleanor Roosevelt over Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Pope Francis? Don't we want them all? In the animal world, would we want to choose a jellyfish over a starfish? A lion over a tiger or a cheetah? Right? What did we hear this morning? A cat over a dog? The examples are endless because the diversity of forms is both multitudinous and ultimately unknown to us. We don't know all that lies beyond the event horizon of our galaxy, or even every living thing in the plot of land behind the church. Even slimy slugs and annoying mosquitoes are part of the beauty, and not simply because they have roles in the vast biodiversity of nature. That's not it. Their roles, their uses aren't what matter to Whitehead. They are beautiful because the wide universe somehow conspired to make them, to make these diverse forms emerge through processes both natural and social that we humans are only just and very imperfectly beginning to comprehend. So an arc bending toward beauty is an arc bending toward multiplicity of form. And since such a universe is amoral, this would mean that the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of Africans are also part of this ever-diverse beauty. This would mean that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz are all part of the arc of the universe bending toward beauty. It's an unsettling idea. I've unsettled myself with that thought. Have I unsettled you with that thought? Something here just doesn't seem right. Now, even if Whitehead is right, even if plenitude of forms, good and bad, lovely and ugly, is a sign that the arc of the universe bends toward beauty, well, clearly beauty is not enough. How do we get from the lived experience, we know this diversity, how do we get lived experience of Whitehead's universe back to Parker's universe, bending toward justice? How do we get there? Well, we have to bend the universe that way. We are the moral beings in the universe. We care not only about what is diverse and beautiful, but also about what is right and just. Bending toward justice, that is not the universe's work. That is our work. Now, interestingly, within Whitehead's conception, we don't have to choose between beauty and justice. Just like we don't have to choose between Julia Roberts and Michelle Pfeiffer and even Lyle Lovett. Attention to the diversity of forms as the beauty of the universe can lead us toward justice, since attention to the diversity of forms means including more, excluding nothing from the vision of justice. Inclusion, more folks sitting at the welcome table, liberty and justice not just for some but for all. We know these things are important. But see, that's why the Black is Beautiful movement in the 1970s was so important. That's why Black Lives Matter now is so important. This is why making it easy for transgender folks to pee in peace and safety matters. A diversity that was denied, variety positioned as defect or a problem, rather than a sign of the more diverse and so the more intrinsically beautiful, that's the diversity we need to lift up. This is how we can see the work of justice as our human work within a beautiful universe. We can do the work of justice, which is to embrace the blessings of promptitude and difference, to seek the multiple and the varied. Sameness isn't beautiful. It's not adaptive. It's not resilient. It's not natural. It's not healthy. And it's not just. I want to conclude with a story about my trip home from Chicago a few weeks ago. I was at seminary classes. I find this a beautiful story in that Whitehead sense of the word. So you can tell me later what you think. I was dragging a too heavy suitcase in the passage between the red and blue lines on my way to O'Hare Airport. The light was garish, neon, and 3 panhandlers plied their trade. All 3, whether sitting or standing or pacing in front of the stairways that led to the train platform, they were loud and frantically in motion and probably tight on one substance or another. I felt intimidated and fearful, and I felt compassion. I was not about to give money, to dig in my purse and be swarmed, but I did look at the first man I encountered, who was sitting on the floor behind his cardboard sign. I looked at him as a person who deserves to be regarded as I would regard any other person. And I said, "I'm sorry, I have nothing for you. I hope you have a good day." And I said the same thing to the man standing a ways down the other side of the corridor. And I heard him say to the first man as I walked through, "Did you hear what she said? That was nice." The third man moved to the other set of stairs when I got to the end of the hall. He wasn't blocking my way anymore. As I banged my too heavy suitcase up the flight of steps to the train platform, I hoped the encounter had ended. But there was another man up there, and his friends from below joined him. Even though I had to fight a smile, I really didn't want to encourage any further contact. But I was having a lot of trouble resisting the urge to tap my toes to James Brown singing "I Feel Good," blasting from the fourth guy's old school boombox. I tried to keep my mind focused. These are fellow humans in need, for sure, of drugs, of money, of self-control, but they're human for sure as well. We all need just a little show of loving kindness every day, don't we? Or a lot, and maybe more than we ever get. These men remind me of the work of justice that needs to be done. Work to change their material conditions, changing those material conditions, not eliminating the joy of friendship, of music and dancing, of a little loud talk to intimidate those of us who might presume to be so much different or so much better than them. Both kind words and focus to keep from singing along help me to keep my humility that day, to give thanks for the blessings of my life, and to see the beauty everywhere. Can we learn to turn toward the complexity of actual human beings, to turn toward the beauty of diversity, toward the beauty of the universe? Can we hold all the diverse forms, amplifying what is included in the just and the right, especially when those forms are so different from us, most especially because of that moment? We can hold International Workers' Day and a pagan celebration of spring in the same space of 24 hours, can't we? It's May 1st and we're going to do it. We already know how to hold diversity. And by including all these diverse and needy humans in our love and hospitality, including ourselves as those needy human beings, we are accepting the lure of the universe toward the beautiful, projecting into a future toward radical love and more of it. This is my desire, not only for myself, but for the world, a moving toward wholeness, including all the painful, the humbling, the ugly, and the lovely. It's a beautiful day. It's always a beautiful day. Let's not get away. Let's see the beauty, all the diversity for the blessing that it is. Let's conspire to bring it into being in love and justice for all. May it be so.
Everything is beautiful in its own way. Like a starry sun, a snow-covered winter's day. Everybody's beautiful in their own way. Under God's hand, world's gonna find a
Join hands, and together let's say the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. If you can help it by swiveling your chair 90 degrees, I Hi, Rita. How are you? Yes, in fact, I finished my last work this week, and then I have
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.